Hey y'all, I'm Carrie,
Hey y'all, I'm Mandy.
and this is Monstrous. This episode contains topics and language that may not be suitable for all listeners. It may be triggering for some. Listener discretion is advised.
Why'd I get tired all
I
of a
don't know.
sudden? I got really tired.
All right, back at it.
What are we doing today?
I'm going to tell you.
Well, I hope.
No, I'm just going to tell you and then make you guess at the end.
Oh, great.
So this one, we're going to have another Would You Rather.
Okay.
I have not picked it out yet, so we'll pick it out at the end.
Oh, shit. All right.
I told you I'm very disorganized this week. I got really far behind.
It's okay.
I had a long week. I slept like 13 hours last night.
Did you
I didn't tell
really?
you that? Yeah.
No.
I was so tired.
You like never sleep.
I know.
You finally crashed.
Yep. So today we're covering a case that's going to make your and everyone else's detective hats spin.
Great.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
So this case is well known in the true crime world, and it is an unsolved case.
Okay.
You'll probably know it. Most, if not all of our listeners will probably know it, but you might not know it to this extent.
Mm.
This case has many layers, several suspects, and numerous theories as to what happened. So now that I've built it up for you, we are going to dive into the murder of Elizabeth Short, better known as the Black Dahlia.
Oh, shit. Okay. I've been waiting for this one.
All right. On January 15th, 1947, Betty Biersinger and her 3-year-old daughter, Anne, had left their home for a morning walk. They were in the Lemert Park area of LA, which was about 5 miles south of Hollywood. And this area was pretty new. It had been planned to be used for a new community, so there was like a lot of vacant lots, right? And as people fucking do, they use these vacant lots to dump like garbage and just, shit that they didn't want because people. So Betty and her daughter were in this area walking along Norton Avenue when Betty noticed a pale white thing in the tall grass of an empty lot. She thought that someone had just dumped a mannequin there rather than getting rid of it properly. But as Betty got closer to it, which was only a few inches from the sidewalk that she's walking on with her 3-year-old,
Oh, God.
she realized that she was not looking at a mannequin, but instead the dead body of a young woman who had been mutilated and bisected at the waist.
Holy shit.
Betty immediately grabbed her daughter, of course,
Right.
and ran to the nearest phone, where she then called the University Division of the LAPD. I'm not sure what a University Division is, so don't ask.
Yeah, I was going to. Let me Google.
Okay. Google to the rescue.
What was it? University Division?
University Division of the LAPD.
It is not. Okay, the term University Division is not an official unit within the Los Angeles Police Department. The LAPD has various divisions and specialized units, but none are specifically designated as a university division.
Okay.
It says the LAPD does have divisions that serve specific geographical areas, and some of these may encompass university campuses or areas frequented by students.
Okay, that's probably what it was then.
Yeah.
Yeah, because none of the sources that I found explained what it was, and honestly, I didn't even think to Google it. I was just like, okay, whatever. It's neither here nor there to the whole story, but now we know. Obviously, in complete shock and horror, Betty wasn't able to completely communicate what it was that she had seen. Which, yeah.
Right.
The officer on the other end of the phone noted that the call was a possible 390, which is someone intoxicated that is either causing a disturbance or is unconscious. The officer also did not get her name or her contact information. To tell you up front, most of the scene and many other parts of this case were completely mishandled. And it all started with this phone call.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
No. That is honestly probably most likely the main reason why the case is unsolved today. It's just the whole thing is just, it was fucked up from the very
Clusterfuck.
Yeah. They did not do their jobs with this one at all. Like, they tried. They tried, okay? But this one mistake just fucked it all. Well, not just this one. There were several.
I was going to say, I'm sure you're going to say some more.
There were several mistakes that caused the whole thing to just be completely fucked up. So once it came out that this case was what it was, it took investigators 10 days to track Betty down to be able to get her statement because the very first officer failed to get her name or contact information.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
So they just took the call and forgot the main part?
Thanks, ma'am.
Deuces.
Yep.
Okay.
Pretty much. So obviously them expecting to just find someone sleeping off their drunken night, that dispatcher only sent one patrol car to investigate the call. A number of journalists and press photographers at the time had like police scanners in their vehicles and stuff. So they heard this call go out. So they all went out trying to see if they could get a story. And oh boy, did they.
Oh, God.
Reporters Will Fowler and Felix Pagel who worked for the Los Angeles Examiner, arrived at the scene first, even getting there before the LAPD did.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. Reporters arrived to a police call before the police did.
That's insane.
Yeah, the 40s.
Yeah.
As expected, Will and Felix were shocked. Will Fowler said, quote, "There's something about a dead body you couldn't mistake. It's difficult to describe two parts of a body being one. However, both halves were facing upwards. Her arms were extended above her head. Her tan, translucent blue eyes were half opened, so I closed her eyelids." Sweet and thoughtful. But guys, don't touch a dead body.
Right.
There are so many reasons why you should not do this. We love the sentiment, love the empathy, but DNA, fingerprints, like just don't do it. Don't do any of it at all. Don't disturb the scene. Don't touch anything. Keep your hands off. Hands to yourself. Okay. So shortly after they arrived, so did the police. They then called the division telling them that this was definitely not a drunk, but instead a brutally mutilated young woman that had very clearly been murdered and dumped here. So this call for the homicide division and backup brought more reporters. And shortly after Betty had first found her, the scene was crawling. And I mean, like, overtaken by photographers, reporters, the homicide unit, and other LAPD officers. The scene at this point became just chaos. Once the news of a dead woman's body being discovered got out, it was wild.
Oh, I bet.
It got so wild that detectives at some point told patrol officers and some of the reporters to link arms or hands to basically like make a human chain around the perimeter of the scene in order to keep people out of it and away from the body.
Like a barricade type thing?
Yeah.
Like a human barricade?
Yeah. So like, you know how like they'll use that tape?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they did, but with people. Because it was so crazy. But by the time they decided to do that, it was too late. The scene had now been completely trampled on by so many people. And to make it worse, this area was left open for reporters and other people to just trample through long after the investigators left the scene. So like they didn't take control of it and keep people out like you normally would, just in case you need to go back.
Right.
Didn't do that. So whatever evidence that they could have possibly gotten by this time, it was either long gone or it was contaminated. There wasn't much evidence, to be honest with you. But like whatever they could get, now they can't use.
Yeah.
So I get it. 1947. They don't know what we know now, but
Right. That is true.
I feel like it's basic
Common sense.
right. Get it the fuck together. Like, you fucked up this whole thing from the very beginning. Minute 1. Okay, so even still today, murder victims are just kind of dumped wherever, right? But during this time, it was really common for someone walking down the street to just kind of stumble upon a dead body in empty locations, like the lot that Elizabeth was found in, especially in the Los Angeles area,
Holy shit.
right? That's why.
So it's like an everyday thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Once a week.
That's why I will never live in a city. No, thank you.
No.
I'm good. I do not want to walk out my front door and see a dead body. I'm all right.
No, I'm good.
Like, this was the area and the time, but from the moment that investigators arrived, they knew that this was not their everyday run-of-the-mill dead body. It was very clear that Elizabeth's killer was not just trying to dump her body and distance themselves from it. Her killer made sure to leave the shock factor behind and did so in a way that no one would ever forget. And in a way that would humiliate Elizabeth even after death. Her body had been arranged in a very specific way, and it had been left in a specifically chosen location that would ensure she would be found quickly. Elizabeth's body was arranged so that the two halves of her body were placed close together, but far enough apart that you could see that she had been bisected. From reports, it was about 12 inches apart between her upper and lower body parts. Then her upper half was placed asymmetrically to her lower half, so just a little farther to the side than one. Her arms were raised above her head and both were bent at an angle, so kind of like this.
So like this.
Yep. She was found completely nude, and it looked very much as though she was posing for a photo. One of those like that you would find in like one of those old spicy risque magazines. Like that. Yeah. Which that makes all the photos taken by reporters and other people even more creepy and haunting. This posing was not done by mistake. Whoever did this was definitely trying to send a message about who Elizabeth was, who people thought she was, or even something about the killer himself. The level of violence Elizabeth suffered was out of this world. And it was a lot for even the veteran officers of the LAPD. Like, most of them had never seen and would never see this level of violence. Detective P.W. Freestone, who was one of the detectives on scene, had told reporters that this was the most brutal example of a sex crime he had ever seen. So like I said, Elizabeth had been bisected, and this was done very clean, like really cleanly done. Whoever did this had access to the type of tools needed in order to do this, and it was most likely done in a surgical setting by a doctor. Yeah. Now, obviously, we have never been in a setting where you need to cut a human body into parts, right? But from research, I've come to know, and honestly, just through common sense, the human body is not easy to cut through. Like maybe the skin and stuff, possibly, but like the bones and the muscle, all of that is tough.
Right.
You're not going to get through that easily. So to be able to do this as cleanly as it was done, you have to kind of know what you're doing, which we'll get into all that later. To tell you right now, up front, I fully believe whoever did this had medical knowledge. Either had been to medical school, was an active doctor, was a surgeon, something. Because you have organs all in where she was cut in half.
Right, because she was cut like
right at the waist.
Right, yeah. Like a C-section, like where or a little bit higher, like a C-section would be.
I think it would be a little bit lower or around that general area.
Like around your hip bones.
Yeah, so you have to know where all the organs are.
Right.
You have to know how to do it, all of that.
Yep.
So, by the way, there was zero blood at the crime scene.
How the hell is that possible?
I'll tell you.
Oh, I know. You're going to.
So, Elizabeth had been killed and bisected somewhere else.
Right.
Don't know who you are. Because there was no blood. But you can't do this without a bloody mess. Unless you first drain the blood or drain the body of blood like you would in a movie. So, again, you have to know what you're doing because you have blood vessels, organs full of blood, all of that. You have to know what you're doing to get around all that. You have to have a place to do it because it's going to be a bloody mess. The human body has about 5 liters of blood in it. 5 liters of soda.
Mm-hmm.
That's how much body the average human has inside of them at all times. Being pregnant, weight, height, like all the age, all of those things can change, fluctuate it, maybe a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but that's the average, 5 liters. That's a ton of fucking blood.
Yeah, that's a lot of blood.
And to drain all of it out, to do what was done to Elizabeth, you have to have a place to do it. Because in order to drain every ounce of blood, like they did to her, you need gravity. So someone hung her up like a deer and just waited for her blood to drain out.
That's fucking psychotic.
Yeah.
Like, very precise.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, they definitely knew what they were doing.
Yeah. And you have to have knowledge in order to do it right, so there's no damage or anything to the body. And some of the suspects have some pretty big houses with basements, so they had room to do all of this. So, in order to do this guy would need to have access to tools in a room, but also the capability to do it, because whoever did it isn't your average guy who just lost his shit and killed her.
Right.
And he wasn't some jealous fucking boyfriend and killed her out of a jealous rage. There's 3 things this guy has to have in order to be able to do it. Okay? Remember that.
Okay.
It'll come.
3 things.
Yep. So as we go through this case, I think you'll come to the same conclusion that I did, because it became very clear to me and many others that what was done to Elizabeth was not this guy's first time doing it. I'm not sure if he ever did it to a living person, but he had definitely at least done it on a cadaver before, because this was very clean cut, and few people can cut into a human body and be able to do it cleanly. So this guy, like I said, was a doctor, a surgeon, medical school, something, in order to be able to do this. So aside from being drained of all of her blood and then bisected, Elizabeth had been beaten. She had a ton of lacerations on her face and her head. And I think the biggest detail, aside from her being bisected, right, is what people really remember. And that is that Elizabeth's killer had cut her mouth ear to ear, giving her a Glasgow smile.
Yeah, those smiley faces.
Like the Joker. Yep.
Yeah, like the Joker.
Mm-hmm. So everyone can imagine the crime scene, what it looked like, despite the lack of blood. Okay. It was not pretty. So to run through it and put it all together in one place for everyone, because it's kind of all over the place. Elizabeth was found nude. She was bisected. Her body was posed with her...
She was cut
in half. Her body was posed with her arms above her head.
Okay. So, like, I'm picturing like a ballerina does.
Yes.
So like
exactly
that with
like
their hand when they're in that. Okay.
Yep, exactly like that. Her upper half was off center from her lower half. She's been beaten about her head and face. Then she was given the ghoulish permanent smile that is the Glasgow smile. She had several superficial cuts and scrapes on her body. And there also appeared to be ligature marks on her neck, wrists, and ankles. Those could have all come from when she was drained of her blood.
Right.
So now, after initially looking at Elizabeth's body, police fan out and they combed the lot for any evidence that they could find. But there was very little to be found. What they had been able to collect was some paper cement bags that had what they thought were small drops of diluted blood on them. These are what investigators believed were used to carry both sections of Elizabeth's body to the lab. They found visible tire tracks on the sidewalk and a slightly bloody heel print of a man's shoe. That's it. So, just a few things. But they could be some pretty good pieces of evidence if you have someone to tie it to. But according to former detective Steve Hodel, the 2 pieces of important evidence were not secured or photographed on scene by the detectives there.
Of course not. Why would they be?
Yeah. So aside from this, there was nothing at the scene. And they had no way of identifying who this woman was because at the time they had no idea who she was.
Oh, the one that
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
They had no idea who she was when they found her.
Oh, the one that was gone.
Yeah. We know who
Right.
Black Dahlia is.
Now I get what you're saying. I got it confused with the one that made the phone call.
Oh, sorry.
I know. No, I got it confused. I get what you're saying now.
I was going to ask you if this was Black Dahlia.
Yeah.
Yes.
That story's been around for years.
I know. That's my mom, everybody. She's just coming in, so
She's part of the podcast today.
oh, okay. Anyway, sorry guys, back on track. So aside from that, so for a while, she was known as First Jane Doe Number 1, and then she was transported to the coroner's office. The next morning, Dr. Frederick Newbar, chief autopsy surgeon for the county of Los Angeles, conducted the autopsy. He listed her cause of death as, quote, hemorrhage and shock of a concussion of the brain and lacerations of her face. That means that all of the torture was inflicted while she was alive and conscious.
Holy shit.
So the Glasgow smile that was cut into her face happened while she was awake. And I mean, like, this isn't like just a little, this is the real deal.
Oh, from the all the way to the ears?
Yes. I have a picture of it. I don't know if I'm going to post it.
Oh, that's what you were talking about. One of the pictures you didn't know if you were going to.
There's several that I'm going to show you. I'm not sure if I'm going to post.
Could you censorize it to where like?
Not really. I don't think so. They're pretty
graphic.
Yeah. I'm going to show it to you.
Okay.
These cuts were so deep that from the side, it almost looks like her jaw was removed.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Like, it hurts my mouth when I cut the side of it with a chip.
Fuck.
Like, seriously?
I mean, you're not wrong, but
could you imagine
that? No, and being awake for no.
And then she was awake and everything for that?
Okay, so this one was at the crime scene.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, that's wide.
This
it doesn't look like it
was the autopsy photo.
Jesus.
And then this is the side view. Like, it almost looks like she's missing the bottom part of it.
Yeah. It doesn't look like it was just like a straight cut.
Like they went up like a smile. Like that's a real Glasgow smile. Yeah. Horrific, for a lack of a better term. There was another incision just below her belly button that went to right above her pubic area. Several smaller cuts and bruises that were found all over her body, which were believed to be defensive wounds. So while all of this is being done to her, she's fighting back. And they believe that it was the shock and the bleeding from her face being cut open that ultimately killed her.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah. There were what appeared to be evidence of a sexual assault, but samples that had been taken and tested came back negative for the presence of sperm.
So they're not sure.
Yeah. It appears as though she had been. So she could have been sexually assaulted. And the killer or whoever it was that sexually assaulted her could have, you know what I'm saying.
Right, without saying it.
Yeah. So the coroner estimated that her time of death was somewhere within the 24 hours before she was found, but he could not give a smaller time frame than that.
Wow.
Yeah. So now for the bisection. The way in which this was done is pretty particular. This is something called a hemicorporectomy. This was done in the 40s, and it was a pretty new surgical procedure. It had come into use following World War II, and it involved removing everything below the waist of a surviving person. And as far as Newbar could tell, this procedure had been done after Elizabeth was dead. And the precision in which this was done suggested that the killer, or at the very least the person who had done the bisection post-mortem, because it's very possible that there were 2 or maybe more people involved, had some medical experience in medicine and surgery. He also noted that the body appeared to have been thoroughly washed before she was left in the lot, which also suggests a surgeon, because everything is clean and sterile.
What about what are they called? Morticians or what?
Yeah.
Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
The funeral people?
Mhm.
What about
I don't
one of
kn
those people?
I don't know if they know how to do something like that.
Oh, that precise. Yeah, I get what you're
I mean, they
saying.
might be able to, but I'm not sure.
I was thinking about like the blood being drained.
Yeah.
And all of that stuff and the cleaning up.
Oh, yeah, they would definitely know how to do that.
But I didn't think about how precise her being cut in
Yeah,
half and
and
everything was.
There could be more than one person involved for sure.
Because her smiley, well, that's what I call it, wasn't too precise in that picture.
No.
That was sloppy as hell.
Yeah, but it was done while she was alive. And if she's fighting
back and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, that makes sense too. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Okay, never mind. Scratch that idea.
The mortician could have very possibly been involved in the draining of the blood and stuff.
Could have been more than one person.
Yeah. They have no idea. But the coroner even says it's possible that there could be two separate people.
Right.
They just don't know.
That doesn't look like a one-man job.
No, I don't see how it would be.
Mm-mm.
Because that's a lot for one person. But, I mean...
But they said within 24 hours. How could one person do that? All of that.
She died within 24 hours.
Oh, so they don't know how long she would have been tortured or anything like that. Okay, never mind then.
I know when she disappeared. And she disappeared a few days before she was found.
Okay.
Yeah. So
it could have been over a few days.
Right. Yep.
Time.
And then she just died within that time frame.
The 24 hours.
Yep.
Okay. I get what you're saying now.
So the surgery that he's talking about in this report, it was a last resort kind of thing. They did not do this unless they absolutely had to do it. In order to complete this surgery, you have to cut between two specific lumbar vertebrae, which makes it so that you don't have to cut through any bone. This means they have to reroute the spinal cord, your stomach, literally everything that is below your waist because you're cutting it off.
Right.
It's very intense, complicated, and very invasive. So this was not done unless they absolutely had to do it to save someone's life. Like they tried everything else first. Whoever did this to Elizabeth cut in this exact spot, and they cut no bones, nothing. The spinal column is not as simple as you think it would be. Go Google it if you want to. I wouldn't suggest it. Okay. Because I did. It is not pretty. Okay. And Google gives you some pretty gruesome pictures.
Graphic.
Yes. So it's out there. You can Google what it is. It'll show you. But in order to be able to cut through these exact vertebrae without hitting bones or anything else, you have to know what you're doing. You had to have done it or seen it be done before.
Right.
Now, of course, knowing the cause and the estimated time of death is important, as it always is. But investigators would need to know who their victim was. That's just as important, if not more so, to be honest. So as normal, during her autopsy, fingerprints were taken and given to the main offices of the FBI. The Los Angeles Examiner did several extensive pieces on the case. And in this reporting, they put out a lengthy piece that described Elizabeth hoping that someone would see it and then be able to say who she was. Among other things, they described her as being between 15 and 16 years old. Her toenails were painted pink, and she had a 3.5-inch operational scar on the right side of her back. She was also described as, quote, rather developed with small bones and trim legs. Trim legs in the 40s is just, honestly, it's of the time. It's a way of saying that she had thin and physically fit legs.
Why not just say that?
I don't know. It's the 40s. Okay. Now, once the investigation division of the Washington, D.C. office of the FBI got those photos of their Jane Doe's fingerprints, investigators finally got answers to who this girl was. Within an hour of receiving photos of her fingerprints, they found a match from within their 104 million possible matches. Her fingerprints were on file because she had filled out an application for a clerk position at Camp Cook in 1943. And there was a second set of prints on file for her from that same year from when she had been arrested on charges of violating juvenile court laws. These fingerprints did not match a 15 or 16-year-old girl, but instead matched 22-year-old Elizabeth Short. They were way off on the age there. So life for Elizabeth was not easy. Like, she was struggling. Which, I mean, honestly, who isn't?
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth Short was born on July 29th of 1924 in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Boston. Her parents were Cleo and Phoebe Short. Although she was born in the Hyde Park area, she grew up in Medford. This is a working-class suburb located about 10 miles outside the city. At the time she was born, her father, Cleo, had worked in construction, building attractions, like mini golf courses and stuff. Now, when the stock market crashed in 1929, he became unemployed, and lost his entire savings, which I feel like that happened to most in America, to be honest. Then a year later, in 1930, Charleston police found his car abandoned on a bridge, and it was believed that he had taken his own life by drowning in the Chiles River. But a short while after it was discovered that he faked his own death, abandoned his family, and moved to California.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That was ruthless.
Yep. Elizabeth was 6 years old.
Damn.
Yep. Now, with Cleo gone, and Phoebe Short became the sole caregiver and provider for Elizabeth and her 4 sisters. So now Phoebe was working as a bookkeeper. With only one income, they struggled, but they managed to survive the depression without any major hardships. Like, obviously, things were hard. Of course, they were for everybody during that time, but she managed to keep them afloat. During her childhood, Elizabeth experienced chronic bronchitis, and she had severe asthma, which would lead her to have lung surgery when she was 15, which is where the scar came from that was found in her autopsy. Following this, doctors suggested that Elizabeth move somewhere with warmer, drier climates. So she began to spend the winter breaks with family friends in Miami. Then after 3 years of spending the winter months in Miami, she dropped out of Medford High School during her sophomore year and moved to Miami Beach. Here, she quickly found work as a waitress. She was now on her own for the first time. Being on her own for the first time, she began a short-lived romance with Major Matt Gordon Jr. He was stationed nearby at an Air Force base, and he flew as a pilot for the branch. So like I said, this was short-lived because Major Gordon had been shipped overseas in January of 1943. Following this, Elizabeth decided to move to California to live with her father in Vallejo. This was the time frame in which her fingerprints were put in the system because her job as a clerk at Camp Cook. But, as things often go, despite their reconnection, Elizabeth's relationship with her father quickly soured and became what was described as very strange. I don't have any more details than that. Yep. Her father had later told a reporter after Elizabeth's murder, quote, "I made her leave. I didn't want anything to do with her or any of the rest of the family again." I bet you feel like a real shitbag now, don't you, Dad?
Dick.
Like,
fucking asshole.
Right? So within just a few weeks of arriving in Vallejo, Elizabeth moved to Santa Barbara. It was there in Santa Barbara that she was arrested for violating juvenile court laws for underage drinking at a nightclub. During the hearing for this charge, the judge said if she would agree to take a train ticket and return home to Medford, then she would be sentenced to probation. As most would, she agreed, but instead of returning home to her mother, she instead chose to go back to Florida. Now, after returning and settling back into Florida life, Elizabeth resumed her correspondence with Major Matt Gordon, the Air Force pilot from earlier. In 1948, he went back home after being injured during active duty, and this was when he supposedly proposed to Elizabeth. And despite the two only meeting a few times in person, she accepted, and then he returned to active duty. Unfortunately, though, this bliss and future life was short-lived after Major Matt Gordon was sent back overseas. Only a few weeks after Japan surrendered, ending World War II, Major Gordon was piloting a P-51 Mustang near Kalikunda. I totally butchered that, but sorry. In West Bengal, India. He was shot down and killed. Now, obviously, this episode is about Elizabeth Short, but I do want to take a minute to acknowledge Major Gordon's honors. He was a well-decorated officer, and for me personally, the military is close to my heart, as many of my own families have served. So, although this is about Elizabeth, I feel like we should acknowledge his sacrifice. So as I said, Major Gordon was a decorated officer. For his service in World War II, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, making him one of 1,400 service members to receive this honor.
Wow.
He also received the Silver Star.
Nice.
Okay, back to Elizabeth. So as anyone can imagine, the death of Major Gordon was just another traumatic, devastating loss for her. And at this point, She's only 20 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Following this death, she found work again as a waitress, but within a few months, she decided she didn't want to stay in Florida and went home to Medford. There, she found work at a local theater, and even though she grew up here, had work, she didn't feel like she was settling in, and she didn't feel satisfied. She thought being home would bring her comfort, but it didn't. It never does. So now she's not sure what to do because neither home in Medford nor Florida made her happy. So on April 17th of 1946, she decided to pack up her things and move back to California, this time going to Hollywood. From what I could find, it seemed like, at first she kind of struggled to find her footing. According to one source, Elizabeth lived a transient life at different boarding houses with a range of different roommates. During the summer, she stayed at a hotel in Long Beach for a few weeks and then would go back to Hollywood. After returning, she again bounced around staying at different places, but eventually she found an apartment where she lived with 7 other young women. There's no fucking way.
I couldn't do that. 7 other females? No, I'm good.
Like, girl, I don't know how she did it. Because I would have killed one of them.
Yep.
Now, during this time, she was employed as a waitress at the Florentine Gardens nightclub. This is where she really didn't make any money here. All right, just to be honest. She was really struggling to make her rent. Due to this, about 2 to 3 weeks before Christmas, she had told her friend, Ann Toth, that she was going to Berkeley, but instead she went to San Diego. Ann later told detectives that right before Christmas, like literally just days before, Elizabeth had gotten a hold of her and told her she was low on funds and asked if Ann would send her $20. After this, Elizabeth again got a hold of her saying that she was going to come back from San Diego and that she would send a letter. But the letter never came in, and that was the last time she would ever hear from her friend. Okay. Ann Toth may not have ever heard from her friend again, but Elizabeth did in fact return to LA on January 9th, which would ultimately be the last time she was ever seen alive. That evening, Elizabeth Short was last seen leaving the Ovalville entrance of the Biltmore Hotel. Now, in 1947, the people of LA were, they were used to seeing violence in the city. I mean, I'm sure they're probably used to it now, to be honest with you. These reports were all through the press, basically on a daily basis. But Elizabeth Short's murder was unlike anything that any of them had ever seen. Honestly, I think it's unlike anything we've ever seen today.
Right.
The news of her death hit the papers that afternoon, as expected, it set off a media frenzy. The media frenzy was primarily due to what Glenn Martin called the, quote, brutal, misogynistic, and ritual nature that the murder contained. Which, he's not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't just murdered.
Right.
She was tortured, mutilated, humiliated, all of the above. I choose choice D. The media did what it does best, and it added a ton of sensationalism, which doesn't need that.
Right.
They were quick to emphasize the sexual nature of the murder, and it went as far as labeling the killer as, quote, a sex maniac and a sex fiend.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't bad enough.
Right.
Yeah, Dad.
Which, there was a sexual aspect to it. Okay, that's a fact. But let's not forget, she was also beaten. She had all of her blood drained. She was given a Glasgow smile and bisected.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't forget those things.
Right.
So now, as per the norm for the time, law enforcement and press were pretty involved with each other. Like, very intertwined. And like most cases of this time, the press played a big role in this one, particularly when it came to shaping how the public viewed the killer. Once the victim was identified as Elizabeth Short, the story in the papers really picked up, of course. Being mostly because she was very beautiful and she was mysterious. There really wasn't anyone that really knew much about her. For the time, she was the perfect salacious topic for everyone to just sink their teeth into. There were a ton of rumors that went around about her past and about who she was dating, because apparently she dated a lot of men. Who fucking cares?
Mm-hmm.
I hate that so much. Like, who fucking cares?
Right.
Why does that have anything to do with this? Anyway, with all this, the story became what was called, quote, a sad cliche, the ultimate warning tale. Within days of the discovery of her body, the press began to call her, the Black Dahlia. This was in reference to Elizabeth's jet black hair, the fact that she often wore black, and her favorite flower, oftentimes seen with one in her hair, was the dahlia.
Oh, nice.
The movie playing at the time was also the Blue Dahlia.
Oh, wow.
Yep. The name added to the sensationalism and the mysterious of not only Elizabeth, but the crime as well. And honestly, the name she was given is the big reason to why the case has so much notoriety. Because a name like the Black Dahlia is not one that you easily forget.
Right.
Now, the crime scene itself, like I said before, including the neighborhood canvases, gave way to very few clues in which way the investigation should go. Like, they didn't know their heads from their fucking asses in this one. One local man named Bob Meyer told detectives that he had seen a 1930s model Ford sedan stop in front of the lot around 6:30 a.m. The man inside the car had lingered around the area where the body was found and then drove off. Other than that, he couldn't tell him anything. Having her identified, though, gave investigators something to go on because now they could start connecting people to her and start looking into each of them. Now, the first person they looked at was her mother, Phoebe. Investigators wanted to know everything about Phoebe and Elizabeth, hoping that something in one of their backgrounds would lead to who the fuck did this. According to Phoebe, her daughter had left for San Diego a few weeks before her death. She had found work at the Naval Hospital there. She said Elizabeth had left Hollywood because the movie strike had made it difficult for her to find work as an extra. She had no idea why her daughter would have returned to LA the night of her disappearance, and she couldn't offer anything other than that. Now, with the clear sexual undertones of the crime, the investigation turned towards Elizabeth's romantic life following this, because
it always does.
Yep. Took it right out of my head. Mm-hmm. According to Phoebe, the only serious relationship Elizabeth had ever had was with the late Air Force pilot Matthew, the one who died in action. Phoebe may not have known about any other relationships aside from Matthew, but her friends and roommates did. And she definitely had other relationships. They just weren't as serious as the one with Matthew. According to an article published by the Los Angeles Times shortly after Elizabeth's death, she was known to her friends as the girl that had a different boyfriend every night.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Her roommates and several others that knew her said she took a liking to sailors and would often visit the nightclubs where soldiers were known to go. Which, all right, she dated around.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's her right.
Right.
She's in her 20s. She has no reason not to. And she's just trying to find her way in the world, right? That does not mean that she deserved what happened to her.
Right.
Or that she was asking for it. And as for her fondness of sailors and soldiers, that was very much at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, every girl in the 40s wanted to bag themselves a soldier. And if he was a sailor, it was even better.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was just normal. Now, investigators obviously learned this from the interviews from those friends and roommates that were closest to her. From those, they also learned of several men that they believed to possibly have played a role in her death. Of these men, investigators zeroed in on a man that Elizabeth's friends said she had grown to become, quote, deadly afraid of. According to one of her coworkers, Shara Mayland, there was a, quote, tall, sinister, elderly man who approached her at the bar she worked at and asked her about Elizabeth's whereabouts, and she fully thought that he very well could have played a part in Elizabeth's death. Other roommates told them about a radio announcer who had a British accent, who they knew as Maurice, and Elizabeth had talked of him just a few weeks before her death. But aside from his accent and his name, they knew nothing else about him. There were several other men that had come up early in the investigation, including one man that lived in Beverly Hills who had apparently offered to pay Elizabeth, and another from San Bernardino who had asked her to move with him, but each went nowhere. Although weird and creepy, they all just wanted to be with her. Just creepy as fuck about it. So none of these were involved in her murder. Now, are you ready to get mad?
Yeah.
The lead detective on this case tells reporters that Elizabeth was a tease and that she probably went too far this time and sent some guy into a blind rage.
The fuck?
Yeah.
That's fucked up.
Yep. So now we have a lead detective telling reporters that Elizabeth's brutal mutilation and murder is her fault.
That's bullshit.
Yep. Yeah. So despite his awful statements and his just dumbass views, they did have a few promising leads. a tip came in about an ex-boyfriend named Joseph Fickling, who she had met in California in 1944. Like Matthew Gordon, Joseph was a former Air Force pilot who had been living in North Carolina at this time. And the two had been writing letters back and forth to each other as recently as Elizabeth's time in San Diego. So, like, very recently. He had told detectives that she had told him not to write her in San Diego anymore because she was going to Chicago. Detectives got their hands on some of the letters that the two had wrote. Based on those, Joseph's confusion on where their relationship stood and if they were just friends or more than that, and Elizabeth's contradictory or mixed feelings was what ultimately led to the end of their relationship. These letters showed that she had mentioned being engaged to Matthew, but they had failed to mention that he had died 2 years earlier. So from this, I gather that she just wasn't over the loss of Matthew, and she just wasn't ready to be serious like that with anyone else. And it seems like she was trying to like let him off easy without hurting him.
Right.
And ultimately that led to his confusion. She could have possibly had some mixed feelings in there. It just seems like I don't want anything serious. Joseph told detectives in North Carolina when they brought him in to talk that he had last heard from Elizabeth in a letter that she had sent to him that was dated January 8th of 1947, which that was the night that she left San Diego. Given the fact that he was on the other side of the country when she was killed, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect. But from this, they were able to gain more insight into what was going on in her life at this time. Now, a few days into the investigation, they learned that she had come back from San Diego, that she had been with an unidentified red-haired man. So on January 20th, they picked up 25-year-old Robert Manley, who was a salesman, and a salesman that the press described as, quote, a slender, neatly dressed man with carrot-hued hair.
Well.
Yep. This man was believed to have been Elizabeth's companion on the night that she disappeared. Once they brought him in, Robert admitted to being with Elizabeth and said that the two had casually dated since they had first met just a few weeks before Christmas. He said he had dropped her off at the Biltmore Hotel that night. And that was it. He denied having anything to do with her murder. He told detectives that his wife, this is gonna piss you off because it made me so mad. Okay. He told detectives his wife and him had some misunderstandings and that he thought he'd test himself to see if he still loved his wife. So he picked up Elizabeth at a nightclub and said that they hit it off.
The fuck, my guy.
Right? First off, the fuck is wrong with you? Second off, fuck right off.
Right.
Like, you have to have an affair to see if you still love your wife. What kind of shit is that?
A fucking excuse.
Right. I don't know. I have an idea. Don't get married. You fucktard.
That's bullshit.
Ugh. Anyway, this fuck stick here told detectives.
Fuck stick.
He told detectives that he picked Elizabeth up from Pacific Beach Motel on January 8th and then drove her back to Los Angeles. He said he didn't come forward because he hadn't connected the stories in the papers to her.
Yeah.
I thought the same thing, and I don't understand how not, but all right. Investigators were not convinced of his story, so they asked him to take a polygraph test, which he agreed. But after a long drive to San Diego and hours of intense questioning, when it finally came time for him to take the polygraph, he kept falling asleep during the test, so they decided to postpone it. Looks suspicious, I know. I don't know how long they questioned him for, but from what I read, it was hours. And while he was fully awake and aware, he was very forthcoming with them. He told them that the last time he had seen Elizabeth, he had noticed that she had several scratches on her upper arms and that she had told him that they came from a very jealous ex-boyfriend, who she described as an Italian man with black hair who lived in San Diego. Not much to go on. So he seemed to be telling the truth, despite the fact that he couldn't stay awake for his polygraph. His stories, though, seemed to be inconsistent with others that law enforcement had collected, particularly one statement that they had collected from a railway express clerk named William Sullivan. He claimed that he had seen Elizabeth on January 14th. According to him, quote, a woman resembling Short visited the office about noon on January 14th, accompanied by a red-haired man, and inquired about shipping a trunk and some suitcases to Ketchikan Hospital When asked to whom the items were shipped, the woman said to herself and gave the name Elizabeth Short. The same couple was seen about an hour later by a waitress at a cafe in San Diego named Jadale Gray. Jadale described the man as very fair complected and said that his hair was straight and that he had freckles. A lot of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the inconsistent stories and fitting the description of the man seen with Elizabeth, Robert was beginning to look like a pretty good suspect. But the following day, William Sullivan had admitted to detectives that he had been mistaken and that it wasn't Robert. He believed it was someone else that looked similar to him. He then changed his story and said that the woman he had seen was not Elizabeth and was just another woman that had matched her description. And this was confirmed when a young woman who looked a lot like Elizabeth came forward to say that she had been at the express office with her boyfriend on January 14th.
Oh.
Investigators then showed William a photo of this woman, and he immediately recognized her as the woman he saw then. So the part where he said the woman gave him her name, he just made that up.
He lied.
Yep. That didn't happen. Yep. So now with this ID and statement now recanted, the mystery red-haired man led to a bust. Captain Jack Donahue ordered officers to release Robert from custody right away. At this point, they were only 1 week into the investigation. 7 days. And detectives were certain that the key to who killed Elizabeth was inside her love life somewhere. And now beginning to believe that the boyfriend angle was a dead end, and that maybe it was just someone that had been able to blend in, someone Elizabeth nor anyone else would think could be capable of brutal torture, mutilation, and murder that was inflicted on Elizabeth Short. Yeah. So now, their best lead is dried up. This red-haired man is a dead end. Those working the now wide-known and one of the nation's most closely watched cases found themselves in a very bad place. They had placed all of their eggs into one basket. And now, a week into this case, they have nowhere to turn. On January 23rd, so 8 days after Elizabeth's beaten, mutilated, and bisected body was found, Detective Harry Hansen told reporters, quote, "We're back where we started." So at this point, nearly 200 officers fanned out all across the city looking for any clues that would tell them anything about the crime. So they're trying. But
they're failing.
Yeah.
Miserably.
So many of them followed up on a ton of false confessions because there was a ton of men, for whatever fucking weird psychotic reason, confessed to killing Elizabeth, even though they had nothing to do with any of it. Yeah. This, of course, was just a giant waste of time and resources. But they followed up everyone, looked into all of them, no matter how outlandish or crazy they were. They had no idea what confessions were false, which ones were true. So they looked into each one. So while some are doing this, some are conducting house-to-house searches, hoping to find some witnesses. So they're not sitting around waiting for just, something to just fall into their laps. I think they really showed up for this case. They hit the ground running to try to figure it out, but it was messed up from the very beginning. There was no fixing that. Meanwhile, the coroner's inquest confirmed the details of the murder, but didn't offer anything else. Especially when it came to the time from when Elizabeth went missing on January 9th to when she was killed, which she was found January 15th.
Uh-huh.
Nobody knows where she was for sure during that time.
For like 6 days?
Yeah. Now, on January 25th, they finally caught a break when a postal clerk found a package that was addressed to the Los Angeles newspapers. He had seen it and knew right away that something wasn't right, and he immediately turned over to the police. Which, good job, guy. Smart. So inside the package, they found Elizabeth's birth certificate, her address book, a package check ticket, and other personal papers. With it was a note. The words on this note were created with, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Cutouts from magazines and newspapers, like those old classic ransom notes.
Yeah.
How creepy is that?
I know.
Like, gives you the ick factor on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it said, here it is, Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow. In his interview, Robert Manley told detectives her address book was inside her purse, which she had taken with her when he dropped her off at the Biltmore. He also said that he had seen the baggage check ticket from the Greyhound bus station. So with this, detectives came to the conclusion that whoever sent this package had seen Elizabeth after she left the Biltmore, and very well could have been her killer.
Holy shit.
Yep. They theorized the killer, realizing the case was going cold, had sent it to the newspapers to spark interest back in the case, to get his quote unquote work back onto the front pages.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Very BTK of him.
Mhm.
So after this, several detectives began to run down the names in her address book, and other officers were trying to find her missing clothes and purse, because those were still nowhere to be found. This was because the day before that package was found and turned over, someone had reported having seen a bag that matched the description of Elizabeth's purse in a trash can on Crenshaw Boulevard, which wasn't far from where her body was found. Then on January 26th, officers found the purse at the trash dump on East 26th Street. Here, they also found one of Elizabeth's shoes that she'd been wearing the night she disappeared. Which, the fact that they were able to find those things in LA is just crazy.
Mhm.
Because there are several dump sites
Oh, I bet.
in LA. So just them being able to find it is it's astonishing. So once they collected the shoe in the bag, they got positive ID that these belonged to Elizabeth after Robert had confirmed that it was the shoe she was wearing. And the man that owned the cafe on Crenshaw Boulevard had identified, saying, yeah, that's her bag, or that's the bag that I saw, because he's the one that reported it to the police. So now, knowing the killer could have followed Elizabeth from LA to San Diego, the receipt of the package and the discovery of the purse led the detectives to believe that the killer was local. And Detective Harry Fremont believed that the killer was still in town at that time. Like, he didn't believe that he had left. So now, having run down all the names in her address book and having cleared every man in it, they began to hope that the sender would follow the package up with a letter, because that's what they said. Now, unfortunately, because we've said several times, people are fucking trash, the news of the package brought with it another flood of anonymous correspondence, and most of them were nothing but hoaxes.
Surprise, surprise.
Mm-hmm. One said, quote, "A certain girl is going to get same as ES got if she squeals on us." Another said, quote, E short got it. Carol Marshall is next. Yep. Others suggested the killer was going to give himself up. One saying, quote, "Dahlia killer cracking wants terms." This one specifically was written on a postcard from Pasadena. And each one they got were all similar to these. And each one was bullshit. But among all these bullshit letters, there was one that caught the attention of investigators. It was written in plain black block letters. It said, "Turning in Wednesday, January 29th, 10 a.m. Had my fun at police, Black Dahlia Avenger." Unlike the clearly false claim letters, this postcard seemed as though it had come from the killer, because not only did it lack the other, zealous, silly, and just outright fucking ridiculous claims like the others, it contained the phrase, "Here it is," at the beginning, which they believed was referring to the letter that come from the package. And just as the letter had said, on January 29th, a man went to the LAPD and confessed to the killing of Elizabeth Short. This man was 33-year-old Daniel Voorhees. He told detectives that he had met Elizabeth 2 weeks earlier in downtown LA and then took her on a ride on the Wilshire Boulevard bus, but had stopped short of giving details to the murder itself. According to this guy, the two had first met in 1941, and he had taken her on several dates before they had lost touch. But when they asked him for more details about how they had actually met and so on, he again refused to say more, and instead said, quote, "I'm sick. I did kill Beth Short." He was willing to sign any document that they gave him confessing to it. And after this, Daniel Voorhees, it's either Voorhees or Voorhees. I'm not sure which way. I saw it be both, so it's one of the two. He was booked into the county jail. There, he was given a polygraph. There, a polygraph test had been planned for the following day. Now, while this seemed like a major break in the case, there were several things in his confession that made the detectives skeptical. Aside from his refusal to provide any details about the murder or how he'd even come to know Elizabeth, they described his story as, quote, "generally incoherent." And they said it was full of contradictions. When they contacted the Phoenix police, LAPD detectives learned that this man had a long record of petty offenses. And at the time of his arrest for suspicion of murder, he was homeless and seemed to be very confused. Now, the next day, so the day after his arrest, Daniel changed his story, now telling detectives, quote, might have killed Short. But he wasn't able to lead detectives to the scene of the murder. He then was held for a few more days so they could look into his story. But eventually it became clear to them that it was just complete bullshit. And so they let him go. Which honestly, I think it was the best call. Daniel Voorhees for sure had some mental health issues. But I don't believe at all that he committed this murder. Because this was an hours long thing. Elizabeth was tortured, had her face cut open, she fought off her killer, was murdered, drained of her blood, and then bisected. Even if whoever did this had simply snapped, at some point, you're gonna come out of it and realize what you're doing. You don't do something like this, commit this type of a brutal crime, and then just don't remember any of it. At some point, you're gonna come to. So now, in the beginning, they believed that her killer was a scorned lover or some kind of ex. Then, after the letters, they believed the Black Dahlia Avenger would lead them to her killer. And now, after Daniel's false confession and the communication from the Avenger had stopped, they again found themselves at a dead end. So now, after 2 weeks of an intense investigation that had hundreds of LAPD officers who combed through every lead and clue, they had no murder weapon, no crime scene, and no suspect. About all of this, the LA Times said, quote, it appeared almost certain the elusive killer was a stranger to Miss Short. They further wrote, as even her closest associates have given not the slightest inkling to police of the identity of the murderer. Chief of Police Jack Donahue agreed, saying that most likely, quote, the Black Dahlia's nemesis was a pickup whom she did not know previously. Moving into February, tips continued in, and just as before, they ran down each and every one. Among them was a woman from Long Beach who had claimed to have heard, quote, unearthly screams coming from a long, expensive car on the night Elizabeth disappeared. She told investigators that she'd been waiting for the bus that evening when she saw a man, quote, holding a woman down in the rear seat of a car with another man and woman in the front seat. She didn't call anybody at the time.
Just waited.
Yeah. There's nothing suspicious about that. So then following this, there was a tip that came in from one of Elizabeth's friends because, they were all trying to think of anything that would help them solve her murder. This friend said that Elizabeth had recently had some cavities plugged with wax candles, which then sent investigators back to potential witnesses to see if anyone had been, caring for their teeth in that way. They asked, did you see her buying wax candles? Did you see anyone else come in and buy wax candles? Those kinds of things. So at this point, most of the tips that were coming in from the LA area. They did receive calls and tips from other parts of the country, but they were all false and they didn't do anything but waste time. For example, in early February, the LAPD received a call from officials at Fort Dix in New Jersey saying that one of their soldiers, a man named Joseph Dumas, had told Army investigators that he had been on a date with Elizabeth the night she disappeared. According to him, he had gone on a date with her the evening of January 9th, but after the date, his mind went blank. And the next thing he remembered he was standing in New York at Penn Station.
That's a long time to black out.
Yeah. Investigators at Fort Dix had taken his uniform that he had worn that night and had it analyzed for blood or other fluid. And they found what turned out to be bloodstains on one of the pant pockets. So now getting this call, they began to look into Joseph Dumas's background. They learned that the 29-year-old soldier had been married 3 times. And on at least one occasion, he had been examined by psychiatrists who recommended that he be hospitalized for psychological reasons. Along with this, aside from his claims of being in California the month prior, there was no evidence that he had been in California. Yeah. So eventually they determined that he had nothing to do with Elizabeth's murder. And the blood stains that were on his pants, they could have simply just been from a bloody handkerchief that he stuffed in his pocket. That's how small they were. By this point, they had spent days on this lead. Yeah. So as of the first week of February came to an end, the LAPD had become so desperate for new leads that they would eventually turn to what the press described as, quote, twice cold clues. So now they're doubling back and looking into old leads that they've already spent a shit ton of time on, thinking that maybe they missed something. So while some investigators looked into old suspects and witnesses, others began following anything at all that resembled a lead. No matter how small or insignificant, they looked into everything. This included a report from a young woman who lived in Culver City. She had told them that she had been waiting for a bus when a man in a 1940 sedan approached her. This woman, named Isabel Foster, said, quote, "The man asked me if I wanted a ride. I refused. He then took out a long butcher knife and ordered me into his car."
Holy shit.
Right? She, of course, panicked and began to cry. The man told her to shut up and, quote, "He would give me what he gave the black." Yeah. Reports like those from Daniel, Joseph, and Isabel were common. None of them ever panned out. And at this point, like, a lot of predators are using
Yeah, copycats
are using the Black Dahlia as a way.
to scare people.
Yeah. So it's like all of these reports are coming in, but they're nothing. It's just some other fucking creep out there. So from the moment the discovery of Elizabeth's body hit the front pages of every newspaper in LA, the case was dominated by claims like this. There was such an intense public interest that it drove the equally intense press coverage and led to so many hoaxes, false confessions, tons of mistaken identities, complete lies, and just people inserting themselves for no reason. These stories were a great read. It was interesting, and the reports made the case seem to be very complex and fast-paced. But the truth was, every bit of this showed just how little the detectives had to work with. And with it, it became apparent to both the press and the readers that the case was growing cold. By the end of February, investigators were grasping at straws, looking for anything that would give them that spark they needed to crack the case. But no matter what they did, they always came up empty. Like, they just fucked this case up so bad from the very beginning. They didn't take pictures. They didn't take molds. They didn't go off the crime scene. They just, from the very beginning, it's just, you fucked it up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a few bad street cops fucked it up
Fucked
for the
the whole thing up,
investigators.
yeah.
Yep. And honestly, that's all it takes.
Mm-hmm.
So once that was done, they had no fucking chance at solving this thing.
Right.
Like, once you mess those first few things up,
Mm-hmm.
you're done. You're not going to solve it. So a few weeks later, investigators came forward and acknowledged they had no leads, no clues, and no suspects. Less than 2 months into the investigation for the murder of Elizabeth Short, the case had gone cold. Less than 2 months is all it took.
That's fucking insane.
Yeah. So the stories that now dominated the papers were heavily informed by people theorizing, speculating, littered with whatever bits of information that the LAPD was willing to give the public. This included information about certain arrests and possible suspects. What was not given to the papers was other suspects whose names weren't released to the press right away. And these were those that were considered to be very likely suspects. Now, since the death of Elizabeth Short, there had been a number of books and articles published, each naming suspects ranging to everyone from Orson Welles to Woody Guthrie, all the way to the notorious gangster Bugsy Siegel.
Damn.
Yep, so it's just a wide range.
Right.
There was a ton of possible suspects. The list at one point contained more than 20 different names. Some were doctors, and there were even a few women on that list. Yeah. Now, many of these had been debunked, proven to be false, but there still remains a small list of names that many believe could very well be the killer. In one book titled The True Story of the Black Dahlia Murder, the author suspects Jack Anderson Wilson, also known as Arnold Smith, as the killer, but this is largely based on circumstantial evidence and nothing more. This circumstantial evidence includes an interview with Wilson. In this interview, Wilson claimed to have been driven to kill by supernatural forces.
Possessed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Insert eye roll here.
Right.
He told John Gilmore that he had to do it when the spirit overtook him. He hinted at his involvement in the murder, saying, quote, "You understand the trouble I could get into because of what he did." Talking about the spirit.
Oh, okay.
Yep. In the years since the publication of this book, it has come under a lot of scrutiny. It has inaccuracies, mistakes in the story, and there's a lot of other things, including the fact that the author paid Wilson for his interview, so he was incentivized to tell a story. The transcript of this interview also makes it appear as though the interview was conducted over the course of many drinks.
Wow.
Yeah. It was also pointed out that years after the book was released, the author had come to an entirely different theory about the killing. In a 1982 interview with the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, John Gilmore had described a man who he believed was a suspect, a man he referred to as Mr. Jones. According to him, Mr. Jones had confessed to having committed the murder and what followed to one of Gilmore's contacts. In this version of events, Mr. Jones had picked up Elizabeth at the Biltmore and, quote, she and Jones traveled from an apartment in Hollywood to the Roosevelt Hotel, where he picked up a key to the house at 33rd and Trinity. Mr. Jones was angry because of Elizabeth's behavior and her refusal to give in to his advances. The two fought about a phone call she had wanted to make, and when she insisted that she leave, he beat her, raped her, and then said he lost all control, torturing her until she was dead. He said in a frenzy, he then cut up her body for disposal. I don't think that's what happened.
No. You did not cut it up very good, my guy.
She was not cut up to be disposed of. Like, if you're cutting up a body, okay, to hide it, you cut off the limbs, you put it into something, and you hide them. You don't pose them in an empty lot.
For somebody to find.
Right.
Everybody to see.
Right. Bisection does not make for an easy disposal. So, I don't believe that. About the bisection, he claimed he had panicked, so he cut her up and then freaked out about her possibly being found, so he wrapped her in curtains from the house. No, sir. That's wrong. They were cement bags, not curtains. So, he said he wrapped the quote-unquote bundle in an oilskin tablecloth and put her in his car. He did not mention draining her blood. There was no tablecloth. There was no curtain. Those guys just full of shit.
Right.
Both of these men, Jones and Gilmore, were both big suspects for a while. But then in 1991, another was put in the front when 54-year-old Westminster resident Janice Knowlton pressed charges on her father, Knowlton claiming that he was Elizabeth's killer. Now, Janice had been undergoing psychiatric treatment at this time. She claimed that she had uncovered some repressed memories of watching her father, George, kill Elizabeth in their garage. She said this happened in January of 1947. She said her father, who had died in a car crash in 1962, had dated Elizabeth in 1947 and that she had been staying in a quote-unquote makeshift sleeping room in their garage. This is where she claims Elizabeth had a miscarriage. So first, if he and Elizabeth had been dating, police would have found his name in her address book.
Right.
Which they did not. Another big issue with this one, for me personally, is that Janice claims to remember a woman sitting in a chair underneath a bright light and seeing her father hit this woman in the face and head with a claw hammer. She did have lacerations and things like that to her head, but there was no reports that I could see that she had any skull fractures. Which, if you're going to get hit in the head with a claw hammer, you're going to have some skull fractures.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to do some damage. And not only that, you've seen the picture. Her face is like, she was obviously beaten. Yeah. She does have marks, but she does not look as though she was hit with a claw hammer. According to Janice, all of this went down in the garage and she had seen it because she was hiding in there. She said she watched as her father used a power saw to cut the body in half. The next day, Janice said her father, quote, took the body to a utility room next to the pier and gutted and cleaned the victim's body. Here's my other issue. You're not going to use a power saw. I mean, you could. But the power saw is going to leave jagged marks. There wasn't any. This cut was clean, as if it had been done with like a scalpel or something like that. It's a bit graphic, okay? With a power saw, you're going to have ripping and tearing. Her body's full of organs. Every one of them was intact, like fully intact. None of her organs had been cut, nicked, or damaged in any way. And with a power saw, that wouldn't have happened. They would have been completely destroyed.
Right.
Then again, Elizabeth had all of her organs inside her body when she was found. She had not been gutted. By the time Janice went to the LAPD with all of this, they were chasing anything down, trying to solve it. But they even had a hard time believing this one. Detective John St. John said, quote, we have a lot of people offering up their fathers and various relatives as the Black Dahlia murderer.
Damn.
I feel like that just says so much about LA.
Right, that's fucked up.
Janice had a lot in her story that just wasn't consistent with the evidence, okay? But despite Detective John not really believing her, she remained convinced that her father George was the man that killed Elizabeth. She told a reporter that her father was a very sadistic man. She went on to claim that he didn't just kill Elizabeth Short, but that he had killed 2 other women as well. One victim she believed had been buried in the family yard in Westminster. This claim, investigators took a little bit more seriously, although suspicious. Okay? They were like, well, maybe we should look into it. So they contacted the Westminster PD, and that summer, 1991, they received approval to excavate the now empty lot where Janice's family home once stood. A few days later, they found a rusty knife, animal bone fragments, and costume jewelry.
Damn.
Right. Odd. And it appeared as though the things were buried on purpose, but no conclusive evidence of any kind of murder.
Right.
So they declined to open an investigation. Despite this, Janice remained strong in her belief that her father had killed Elizabeth, and even went on to high-profile talk shows like Larry King Live, Sally Jesse Raphael, all to tell her story.
Really?
Yeah. In 1995, she co-authored a book with Michael Newton titled Daddy Was the Black Dahlia Killer. Yeah. And even after the popularity of her book and story passed, Janice remained convinced of her father's guilt. Janice ultimately, after a long battle with addiction, passed away on March 5th of 2004 of an intentional drug overdose. I don't think her claim is true. She had a tough childhood. She had a tough childhood for sure. She clearly went through some horrible shit. Okay, because you don't just make this shit up. She definitely saw her father do something to somebody.
Right. That's what I was going to say.
I don't think it was Elizabeth, though.
Mm-mm.
I just wish that, she'd been able to work through it.
Right.
Before I go on, I want to say here, not calling Janice a liar by any means. Repressed memories are real. I have repressed memories. It's what your brain does to protect you from trauma. Like, it blocks it out so you don't remember. But the thing with repressed memories is that, lost my place, is that things are still missing. The pieces just don't fit together right. And in the 1980s, mental health providers placed a lot on repressed memories, which honestly became one of the driving forces for the satanic panic when that came in the 80s and 90s. You just can't put a lot of stock into them. Memory is faulty unless every piece is there and fits together perfectly. You just can't rely on them. I fully believe Janice witnessed her father do something like this because there's just too many gruesome details for it to not be real, but I don't think it was Elizabeth. So now we're going to go to 2003 when a man came forward offering up his father as the possible killer. In 2003, he released a book titled Black Dahlia Avenger. A genius for murder, former LAPD homicide detective Steve Hodel.
Holy shit.
And this one is it for me, to be honest. Steve Hodel was said to be a good cop, and after 6 years as a uniform cop, he became a detective. In the end, he went on to spend 24 years with the LAPD. He worked on more than 300 homicide cases, including the Rodney Alcala case, and he achieved one of the highest solve rates on the force. After he retired from the LAPD, he became a licensed PI, and he wrote the book that I just mentioned, along with 4 others, all about his investigations into the Black Dahlia case. His investigations have been featured on several true crime channels, and then, in 2021, he released 2 other books about the serial crimes of his father, George Hill Hodel, M.D. That's right, everybody. Steve Hodel's father was a doctor, and he wasn't just any doctor. He was a surgeon.
Oh, shit. Suspicious.
At the time of Elizabeth Short's disappearance and murder, Dr. Hodel was a well-known and highly respected doctor. At the time, he was the head of the county's social hygiene bureau. Didn't even know that was a thing.
Me neither.
According to Steve, his father was a hard and cold man with a huge ego, and his demeanor bordered on tyrannical. George Hodel Jr. was born and raised in LA during the first decade of the 20th century. He was very intelligent. He constantly scored highest on every test, and this would lead him to graduate high school early and enroll in the California Institute of Technology at only 15 years old. One big thing that kind of fed this egotistic man was the fact that his entire life, he was treated differently than his peers. He was given the impression very early in life that he was special and deserved to be treated differently than other kids his age. After just 1 year at Caltech, he was expelled. According to Steve Hodel, this expulsion was either for engaging in a sexual relationship with a staff member's wife at 15 years old, or for repeatedly gambling on campus, which was against school rules. It could have been both. In the years that followed, George drifted from job to job before ultimately enrolling in pre-med at Berkeley in 1929. From here, he went on to the University of California in pursuit of his medical degree. By the way, the time in which he was in school for his medical degree was the time in which this specific type of bisecting was being taught. Just a little
FYI.
Yep. So following his graduation, he worked his way up through the state health system, making some very high society friends along the way. It was through this network that he met his first wife, Dorothy Anthony, who was the former wife of director John Huston. George would go on to have one child with Dorothy, a daughter named Tamar, who would be a very pivotal person in Steve's case against his father. The two divorced in 1940. That same year, he married Dorothy Hodel, and Steve was born a year later in 1941. So when Tamar was around 14 years old, she disappeared from the family home on October 1st of 1949. After several hours of contacting friends and neighbors, Hodel reported his daughter missing to the LAPD. 2 days later, they found her staying at a friend's house, and she was taken into custody. She told officers that she had run away because, quote, "My home life is too depressing because of all of those sex parties at the Franklin house." The Franklin house is what they called their house because it was on, like, Franklin Avenue or whatever. This coming from someone so young was a shock to the officers because that meant that she had seen these parties. But what was more shocking to them was her claim that she had actually taken part in them.
Oh, wow.
After a few hours of talking with them, Tamar had implicated her father and 3 other adults in a conspiracy of abuse, as well as confessing that she had engaged in several sex acts with several of her classmates at Hollywood High School. She was clearly being abused on a very large scale here. So given the severity of the case and the notoriety of the men accused, the LAPD moved fast. George Hodel was arrested and held on a $5,000. Now, by the time he was able to post the bail, the news had already hit the papers. And the once prestigious doctor was now being associated with sex parties and incest. In interviews with both police and reporters, Tamar said her father had been molesting her since she was 11 years old. And that she had been encouraged by other adults at various parties to take part in them. Which, no, she was not encouraged. Okay. She cannot give consent. These are adults, so she was raped on several occasions by well-known Hollywood socialites. Just to be clear on that. In early December of 1949, Dr. Hodel went on trial for the abuse of his daughter. The DA presented several witnesses who claimed to have been at these sex parties and seen the things that Tamar had alleged. In depositions, George Hodel himself stated that he had, quote, been, quote, delving into the mystery of love and the universe with his daughter.
Fucking disgusting.
Later, he would say that he didn't do anything to Tamar. Sir, you said it. He also suggested that his memory of the events was like a dream. Yeah, I have no doubt this guy killed Elizabeth Short. But even if he didn't, he's a fucking pig and he's just an absolute monster.
Yeah, disgusting.
Yeah. This case should have been an easy one for the DA. An open and shut case. But there was one statement that Tamar made during her questioning that made the defense change everything. Before he ended his questioning, defense attorney Robert Need asked, quote, "Tamar, do you recall a conversation you had with a roommate at the Franklin house by the name of Joe Barrett? Do you recall in that conversation making the following statement to him? This house has has secret passages. My father is the murderer of the Black Dahlia. My father is going to kill me and all the rest of the members of this household because he has a lust for blood. The entire courtroom was stunned by this. Tamar on the stand tried to explain that she didn't recall ever having this conversation. And it became clear after this that despite how clear the evidence was or how strong the case was going into the trial, that the defense was hell-bent on making Tamar look like a petty and vindictive daughter who was willing to lie to get revenge on her father. The father she felt ignored her.
That's fucked up.
I feel like she wanted him to ignore her.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just me. One defense witness after another got on the stand and said Tamar was a liar, or they recanted their previous statements that corroborated her accusations. They said she was a bully. Then they would get back on the stand and be like, oh, no, I'm just kidding. That didn't happen. Yeah. Steve later learned that several of the defense witnesses... Okay. Steve later learned that several of the defense witnesses had been paid large sums of money to get on the stand and lie for his father. Logan goes, worst day ever, with a bunch of crying faces. I was like, what's wrong? He goes, Hunter's mom's dad is in the hospital. I was like, I know. She texted me. He's like, so I can't do a sleepover. I was like, I know, you can stay another night. It's all right.
Poor guy.
Okay. And in the end, Dr. George Hodel Jr. was found innocent of all charges.
The fuck?
Yep. I hope every single person that got on that stand that lied has the fucking life you deserve, because you are so fucked and just as bad as he was. Just saying. Anyway, so months after all this, George moved to Hawaii, where he got remarried and cut off all communication with all of his children. Yeah. So now Steve never gave any thought into the statement about his father being the Black Dahlia killer until he began to go through his father's belongings after he died in 1999. While going through his dad's things, he came across a small photo album that not only held a photo of Steve's ex-wife from before the two had met, but also a photo of Elizabeth Short. This, of course, caught him off guard, so he began to dig into his father's history just a bit more closely, trying to figure out why exactly his dad had a photo of a notorious murder victim. Over the course of several years, Steve combed through old police files, and city archives, because at this time he's an LAPD detective, so he has access to all of it. He talked to anyone that knew his father, and through this process, he learned that George had close relationships with several celebrities, including the artist Man Ray, who would prove to be a big figure in Steve's theory. According to Steve, in the mid-1940s, Dr. Hodel had become known as a reliable and discreet provider of abortions, whose clients list included Elizabeth Short. In interviews, Steve claims to have spoken with at least 8 people who asserted that they had firsthand knowledge that George had some kind of a relationship with Elizabeth. And then Man Ray comes out with a new painting in 1943. And it appears as though Elizabeth had posed for, and then later paintings depicting posings and other signatures of the crime scene. Those paintings included the Minotaur and Love's Lips. The most weirdest fucking names for a painting.
Love Lips.
I have pictures. I'm going to show you. So this is the one that came out in 1943. So the one that came out before her murder. Let me just move over here. So that's the painting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So those like geometric markings here, that was carved into her right hip. Shit.
Mm.
It's the exact same markings that's in the painting.
Right.
From 4 years before.
Mm-hmm.
Then this one is the Minotaur. Okay. These ones came out, she was found. This one is the Minotaur. That is the way in which she was posed.
Right. That makes sense.
The next one is the Love Lips. It's a painting that shows a disembodied woman's smile, like floating into the sky. It's kind of weird, to be honest. Yeah, super weird. Let me see. I have one more, which this one is harder to find. This one was painted in 1939, so before Elizabeth went missing and was murdered. And it depicts a woman's nude torso with a pane of glass slicing her in half at the waist. These were all painted by Man Ray.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. Let me see. He painted them? Yes. He was a painter. He was a well-known artist. Yeah. Now, some of these were before the Black Dahlia murder, as I said. But there's evidence that Man Ray and Dr. Hodel knew each other. And based on evidence that he uncovered, Steve believes that they both knew Elizabeth. He believes that George had coaxed Elizabeth to a party at his Franklin home where she had been sexually assaulted, tortured, and murdered. Then the two men depicted the art that Rayman had released before. Then he later came out with the other paintings that showed what they had done, which Hodel was very fond of Man Ray's work, especially the two that came out before Elizabeth's murder. The two that looked very much like this. So this one.
Right.
And then that one with the carvings.
That makes sense.
Now, with all this circumstantial evidence, none of it's concrete, but it's very good circumstantial evidence.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, it really makes sense.
And he's not alone in his suspicions either. Mm-hmm. This is the part that is really going to piss you off.
You have done pissed me off like 2 or 3 times in this damn podcast so far.
Well, buckle up, because we're not done.
Buckle up, buttercup.
Hold your butt cheeks. So following the acquittal of the sexual assault and abuse of his daughter, the LAPD detective started to look at George closer as a suspect in Elizabeth's murder. So much so that they followed Dr. Hodel for weeks, and they tapped his phones. During this time, George was heard on more than one occasion very vaguely alluding to his participation in the death of Elizabeth Short. In one conversation the day after his phones were tapped, George called a friend and said, quote, "Suppose and I did kill the Black Dahlia. They can't prove it now because my secretary is dead." In those first few days, George said many things that leans towards his involvement. Like he was heard bragging about paying off law enforcement, having officers demoted, and paying off witnesses. And he wasn't alone. There were other doctors that he was friends with who had made statements to law enforcement that George had made comments like, quote, "Someday I'm going to fix Tamar. I'm going to cut a chunk out of her calf of her leg and fry it and eat it in front of her eyes, then puke it up in front of her face."
The fuck?
To note here, there was a large portion of Elizabeth's thigh that had been violently removed, and her right breast had been sawed off.
Okay, so I seen that in the picture, and I was wondering what that was.
Yep. In February, there was one conversation heard on the tap where George is heard speaking about his secretary, Ruth Spalding, who was the one that he had been talking about before. She had died under a suspicious overdose in 1945. In this conversation, he said, quote, "They thought there was something fishy. Anyways, now they may have figured it out, killed her." Ruth was a loose end for him because if he did have a relationship with Elizabeth, she would have known about it.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless, regarding Ruth's death, Steve said the LAPD acknowledged that they had suspected and even investigated his father of intentionally overdosing her with seconal, I think that's how you say it, which is a barbiturate and a sedative. They looked into him because they thought he had done it, but nothing ever came of it. At one point in the transcripts, there's a woman heard screaming, and George says, quote, "Leave no trace." When it came to if he killed Elizabeth,
You're getting there, girl.
I know.
You're getting there.
When it came to if he killed Elizabeth, in the end, that investigation went nowhere. And it ended when he moved to Hawaii in 1950.
Why?
I don't know. No clue. He said, fuck it. He's out of here. It's not our problem. Now, in the early 2000s, Steve took everything that he had gathered in his investigation to the Los Angeles DA. They reviewed everything, and they decided not to pursue the case.
That's fucked up for real.
Steve did all the legwork. You just gotta look into it. He did your job for you. What's the harm? The guy's dead. He's not paying anybody off anymore. What's it gonna hurt?
Right.
Do your fucking jobs. Not like that. These tapes were live. So they heard everything as it was happening.
That's insane.
I don't get it. Steve doesn't either. He's like, why did no one listening go over and see what the hell was going on when they heard a woman screaming?
Mm-hmm.
They just acted like it didn't happen. I fully believe Dr. George Hodel was the man that tortured, killed, and mutilated Elizabeth Short, without a doubt. He had the tools, the space, and the skill. None of the other suspects had all three, which, in order to do it, you need all 3.
Right.
I looked it up. I'm sure everyone else will too. George Hodel had a massive house, and it had a huge basement, like a labyrinth type basement. There was plenty of room for him to do what he needed to do with a lot of hidden spaces, and no one would know. But there were also a lot of people around Dr. Hodel that would do whatever they had to do in order to save their own asses, to make money, to save their reputations, and to get to the right people. Everyone inside his house, including his staff, who he managed to sleep through most of them, by the way, were all on his side and would stay silent about whatever went down inside that house because he had shit on them too, in order to keep them quiet. In the 78 years since Elizabeth Short's body was found in that vacant lot on the west side of South Norton Avenue in Leimert Park in LA in 1947, her murder has fascinated the public and has generated every myth, legend, and lore possible. At this time in time, there's a lot that you're going to hear. Most of it's legend. There's so much more to why she went to Hollywood. She wasn't just a girl looking for stardom, as many claim. She wanted to be healthy, to be able to breathe, to get her life together, to meet someone and just start over. How quickly this case rose to notoriety and how it has stayed there is surprising, to be honest, because she wasn't a star. She was a normal girl struggling to find her way, just walking around the world. But when you look at the way in which she was found, the torture that she endured, and the all-around mystery that surrounds Elizabeth Short, it's easy to see how there was and still is such a fascination. Whatever you believe or whatever the evidence and facts show, I don't think anyone is ever going to have an ending in this case. But I believe that Steve Hodel is onto something. He was close to the suspect, investigated his own father because of his belief, and came out with some pretty compelling evidence. And he's a trusted source. I mean, what exactly is he going to gain if his father is a killer?
Right.
In the end, Elizabeth Short went to Hollywood to become an actress, to be healthy, to find her way in the world. But as many young women did, she struggled and only found disappointment. And in the end, that dream had cost her and ultimately led to her death. And that is the case of the Black Dahlia, the murder of Elizabeth Short.
That's crazy.
Insane. Okay, I'm going to show you the rest of these pictures. I don't know if I'm going to put these on Facebook or not because they're rough.
She was pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God.
Ugh.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to put all those.
Yeah, I don't know if you should.
Those are, yeah, see,
They're rough.
seen the pictures. They're
Graphic.
horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do have pictures, but I don't think I'm going to put those ones because they're rough. You just got to Google them. They're everywhere.
Yeah, I'd let everybody look them up.
They're rough shit. Okay. You can find the transcripts for those wiretaps online.
I'll have to look into it.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to put the link for those in the episode description and on the Facebook page. They're fucking insane. Like, they're bananas. Okay. Like, he says so much shit that could have been used against him, that could have put him in prison. And they just
Let it go.
Yeah, just look the other way.
Yep.
Yeah. But I'll put those there so that way nobody has to search for them. That way, because they're crazy. Anyway, that's all I got.
That was a wild one. I didn't know a lot of the stuff that you said.
A lot of people don't. Because a lot of like what's out there is, like I said, it's legend and myth and just rumors. But like she wasn't, yeah, of course she wanted to be an actress. Everyone in the 40s wanted to be an actress. But that's not ultimately what took her to the warmer areas. Is because she couldn't breathe.
Right.
It's a wild one, that one is.
Yeah, that's crazy. And the fact that he just got away because he moved to Hawaii.
Yep. They're just like, oh, he's gone. Who cares? It's like, I just don't. Okay. I got one for you. So would you rather know all of Israel Key's crimes or all of Ted Bundy's?
I know. I want to say Ted Bundy.
It's so hard.
But yeah, that's what I was going to say. On the other hand,
see, I want to say Israel Key's because there's so much that's not known about him.
That's what I was going to say. Like Ted Bundy, there's movies, there's all kinds of
Yeah,
shit.
like I'm sure there's crimes that we don't know about.
Oh, most definitely.
But Israel Keys, there's
so much
that is unknown about.
Right. Said Bunny, there's all those movies and all kinds of shit out.
Right. There you go. I know your answer, but it's going to be funny anyway.
What?
Would you rather spend a week with Pennywise from It or Frank the Monster from Hellraiser?
Frank the fucking monster. No, I don't do clowns. That was an easy one.
I know. I just wanted to see.
I didn't even have to think about that one.
I knew that was going to be it. I just wanted to see what you would say. Would you rather find yourself in Carrie or Pet Cemetery?
I do too. Well, I don't remember when it came out. I remember watching it.
Say, damn, girl. Shit.
Lying about your age, bitch.
I know, right? Damn. I remember watching the original one and then the new one that they had posted, or the new one that they had made. It's not new now, but I like Pet Cemetery too, but I'm not all about burying motherfuckers and then they coming back. So I think I'm gonna go Carrie. I'm all about dumping some blood on motherfuckers and shit. I'm game to do that, but
It was pig blood.
yeah, I had a few people I'd like to do that too.
Barry.
I have none that I want to bury and bring back though.
No.
Maybe they'll be different if you bring them back.
Yeah, they're babies chasing you with fucking knives and scalpels and shit. No, I'm good. I can get that in real life. Like that. No, I'm good.
Okay. That's all I got for this one.
Me too. This is a long one.
Yeah.
But good. I learned a lot.
Yeah, I thought it was a good one.
You really took a deep dive in that one. You went down a lot of rabbit holes.
The next one will be fun. I'm gonna change up because this one was pretty heavy. So I'm gonna change up my episode plans. We're gonna do. It's a good one.
What is it? Are you not
It's
going to tell me?
It's funny.
You're not going to tell me, are you?
No, it's funny.
Ugh.
It's
You always
funny.
do that to me.
You'll laugh. It's funny. It's a lighthearted one.
Oh, okay.
It was gonna be. I guess technically it would be a bonus because next week we're taking off.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna do 2 episodes this week instead. We just have to decide what day to release the second one on. Should we just put it out on Friday?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny.
Okay.
You'll like it. You'll laugh about it. It's the greatest fucking thing ever.
Why don't you just tell me?
Because
You always.
then when we record it,
I won't laugh.
you won't be surprised by it.
Oh, okay.
And it gives you time to look at it.
Oh, yeah, that is true.
I can't. But it's funny. It's fucking hilarious. It's the best thing ever. It really is.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, come by Friday for that one. It's a good one. Yeah. It's so funny. It's the greatest thing ever. That's all we got. So come back on Friday for that episode. We are taking next week off.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll have after Friday another episode on the 14th of July. We hope everyone has
Good 4th of July.
Friday's episode will come out on the 4th.
Yeah.
Yep. So hopefully everyone has a good 4th of July. Nobody blows himself up with fireworks.
Nobody ends up in the hospital.
Yep.
Or their spouse tries to take their head off.
Yeah.
Like last year.
Let's not talk about that.
That was entertaining last year.
Yeah, it was.
Okay. As always, you can find the photos of this episode on Facebook. That link's in the description.
Some of the photos.
Yeah, some of them. Some of them, the crime scene photos will not be on there. You can Google those if you want to. But we'll have the rest on there. The link for the transcripts will be on Facebook as well as in the episode description if you want to check those out. Please give us a rate, a review. Make sure you're subscribed so you get the notifications when new stuff drops. And that's it. So we hope you keep listening and remember to
watch for monsters
and don't kill people. Bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all. Mama, you can say bye.
Bye, y'all.